Hello and welcome to another virtual author event at the Poison Pen Bookstore. I'm John Charles and I'm especially delighted that we are able to have with us today as our virtual guest author, Alicia Bessette, whose new book is Smile Beach Murder. Before we begin our chat, I do want to let those listening in know that the Poison Pen does have copies of Smile Beach Murder, and we are more than happy to hold one for you to pick up at the store or put one in the mail for you to read. Just give us a call or go online, but do so now because we're running out and we'll have to order soon. So if you want your copy for summer reading, now's the time to get it. And I could not suggest a more perfect book for your summer mystery reading. And now I'd like to welcome in Alicia.
That was a lovely intro. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, I'm thrilled you could be here too. I love discovering new mystery writers. Your mystery was just everything I could ask for as a reader. But before we talk about your new book, let's talk a little bit about who you were before you became the author of Smile Beach Murder. Who was Alicia?
Who was Alicia? There are a couple different ways to answer that question. So if you define the moment I became a writer as my 8th birthday, when my parents gave me a blank-lined journal as a present, then the person I was before that was a weird, quiet kid who liked to wander around in the woods behind her house and steal her brother's Bob Seger records on vinyl and listen to them on the family stereo when no one was home. But if you define the moment I became an author as a writer, as you know, when I started publishing novels, then I would probably talk about my professional life as a print journalist. So right out of college, I worked for quarterly magazines at a few different places. And then I worked for a suburban weekly newspaper, actually in my hometown in central Massachusetts. So does that answer the question?
It does. You were working in journalism, but you did want to be a novelist. And if I understand correctly, you and your husband both kind of took a daring leap to become writers.
We did. So we were in our, I was 28, he was 30, and we had always talked about becoming novelists and didn't really seem to be happening because we weren't writing novels. He was an English teacher. I was working at a college for an alumni magazine. And we just decided, let's really go for it. So we quit our jobs and sold our house and backpacked around Southern Africa for a couple of weeks, visiting our friend who's in the Peace Corps. And then he went for his MFA. And that's when I was working for the newspaper and getting lots of ideas for future novels. And yeah, that was the leap that we took. We actually moved in with my parents, which was tricky and interesting. Very lucky. I mean, we were able to save a lot of money, but yeah, so it amazingly worked out somehow. So he published his novels first, and then I was shortly behind him. So, and here we are.
And so then you decided you had published one book as an author, and you decided now you wanted to try again, but you wanted to try mysteries. Is that correct?
Yeah. So my first novel came out in 2010, and it was a work of women's fiction. And then I had a long fallow period of about 10 years where I was writing manuscripts with the hope of getting them published, and they just weren't getting past the gatekeepers. And I hesitate to call them failed manuscripts because I don't think any writing is wasted, but the attempts I was making certainly wasn't getting me what I wanted, which was to publish a book. So a few years ago, I was sort of at the end of my rope, feeling very depressed. I had just given up on another, trying to had a manuscript, didn't go anywhere, got a ton of rejections. And I decided I was going to give up writing. And I declared to my husband over breakfast one morning that I wasn't ever going to write another word unless it was an item on a grocery list. But other than that, no writing. And he said, all right, whatever. And he said, did you ever consider that maybe you're in the wrong genre? You're trying to write women's fiction, but think about the books that are on your nightstand right now. And so I got up and went into the bedroom and looked at the books on my nightstand. And sure enough, there was an Agatha Christie in there, Rita Mae Brown, Louise Penny. And my husband said, do you see a theme here now? And I said, yeah, but I love reading mysteries, but I'm not smart enough to write one. You have to be really good at plot to write a mystery, and plot is not my strong suit. And he said, well, just make it your strong suit. And so I pouted for 24 hours. And then the next day I woke up and I said, he's totally 100% right. And I set out very intentionally to become a master of plot. So I read a whole bunch of craft books about writing plot, and I took, masterclass.com. Oh. I took a masterclass. Dan Brown has one on how to write a thriller, and it's really good. And I spent 6 weeks outlining the book that would become Smile Beach Murder, and then I spent 10 months writing it. And then I got an agent. So, and he was able to sell it. So I think I was maybe in the wrong genre, and now I'm in the right genre. I don't know.
What can you tell those listening in about Smile Beach Murder?
So, Smile Beach Murder is about a 38-year-old laid-off journalist named Callie Paget. She returns home rather reluctantly to Cattail Island, which is where she grew up in the Outer Banks. And she very quickly gets swept up into some suspicious business. There's a death at the local lighthouse that is very alarming to her. And then there's also a treasure hunt that has been lying dormant for many years and gets resurfaced. And she thinks that the treasure hunt and the lighthouse are linked. So it's a book about coming home. It's about rediscovering your roots and rediscovering a pride in your roots, I think. It's about reinventing yourself in ways that you might not have thought were possible. It's about the importance of story and books and community and setting wrongs to right.
It's a terrific description. It's definitely a mystery. I also, now that you're talking about it, I'm thinking perhaps writing those women's fiction novels was such a waste of time after all, because there's elements of that come into the story as well.
Yes, I think that's a good observation, and I think you're exactly right. It's a cozy, Smile Beach Murder is a cozy, but I think it's on the darker end of the cozy spectrum. And I think you do get a little more of, you get into the emotional lives of the characters a little bit more than you might in a lighter cozy. And maybe I did draw from my 10 years of failure at women's fiction to produce that. So
we'll call them practice efforts and not failure.
Yeah, not failure.
Setting plays a really important role in your book. It's set in the Outer Banks. Cattail Island is fictionalized, but I'm sure you based it on real places. What can you tell us about the setting? And I did not understand your title until I started reading the book, and then it made sense.
You didn't understand my what?
The title of the book until I started reading it. And I said, why is it called Smile Beach Murder? And then okay, this is why.
So I've lived on the Outer Banks for 8 years now. It's a skinny string of barrier islands off the coast of North Carolina. There's an expression that you hear down here quite a bit. The people who live here say it about themselves with great pride. They say the nuts roll to the edge. Isn't that great? So the edge being, of course, the geography of the Outer Banks. It really is the edge. I mean, if you go any farther east, you're out to sea. And the nuts, when you think about it, the Outer Banks has a pretty rich tradition of attracting people with a certain sense of,
Play.
yeah, daring do maybe. So, there's Lost Colony of Roanoke Island, and then you have the maritime history that followed and all these stories of really daring rescues. And these guys were like in rowboats, like rowing out into a hurricane with ropes, rescuing people. I mean, it's crazy. And then, of course, the Wright brothers came here to fly their crazy flying machine that the rest of the world was ridiculing. And even today, there are a fair amount of people who live here who, they would probably say they're free spirits. They want to go surfing when the surf's up, and when it's not, they want to do their art or, teach their yoga classes or raise their kids or whatever, and just live a peaceable life. So that was kind of the stance that I've observed since I moved down here, and the stance that I was trying to capture when I created the setting of the Outer Banks with affection. I hope that comes across. It's sort of like this real strong sense of individualism coupled with like a real belief in and need for community. So,
oh, it's definitely a love letter to that particular setting in the very best sense of the word. What I also love about reading is because I know you're basing a lot of it on fact and real things, but there's also your inventive author skills. So I've come across things like, and I'm probably getting it wrong, but Tennessee grapes or something. I mean, is that a real thing there? Is that?
So that's it. No one's asked me that yet. So I totally made up Tennessee grapes.
Okay.
But there are wild grapes that grow down here, and I think they're muscadines.
I was wondering.
And yeah, and there is a vine on Roanoke Island called the mother vine, and this is real, not fictionalized. And it's supposedly the oldest grapevine, I think, in North America. And I believe it's muscadine grapes or scuppernong grapes, maybe.
Yeah,
Something.
I think, something like that. What about annual Paint Your Door Day? Is that a real thing?
Oh no, I made that up.
Okay. Well, you made it so real. I'm thinking, okay, they really do that over on the coast, and we just don't understand things like that here in the West. But
it is true that red paint, you don't see it a lot because it just, I mean, within a matter of months, it's pink, so unless you want a pink house, there's nothing wrong with a pink house, but
no.
Most people shy away from red, but yeah. Paint Your Door Day is fictionalized.
Now, your protagonist, Callie, is a journalist who was essentially pushed out of her job due to changes in that industry. How much of her was based on your own experiences?
I think what Callie experienced at a daily urban newspaper, the Charlotte Times, which is also fictionalized, is probably a lot more intense than what I ever went through at a suburban weekly. But I think we have a lot in common. She's younger than I am, but she and I both drink green kale smoothies on the regular. I think we both have a similar casual flip-floppy fashion sense. We both love books and reading and cats, although I'm allergic to cats, unfortunately. I think Callie is braver than I am. I am not a fictional character. I'm a real person, and therefore I'm confined to this reality where I have to, sit in this room and make books.
Mm-hmm.
But Callie has the freedom to explore her feisty side, and she can take risks. And I'm lucky that I get to live vicariously through her. So, but she's definitely braver than I am.
One of the many things I loved about the book was the way you write about other mystery authors and mystery books, and kind of are sharing your own readers' appreciation. through her work at Callie's work at the bookstore and her own experiences through her family members. And one of the big influences I'm getting, or I'm guessing, in your own reader's life was Mary Higgins Clark. And in a way, this book also kind of pays tribute to her. Can you kind of talk a little bit about Mary Higgins Clark in your life?
Yeah, I went through a heavy Mary Higgins Clark phase. It was a long phase. It started in high school and it lasted all through college. Mary Higgins Clark was not a cozy author, obviously. Her worlds are dark and frightening, and they're the kind of books that make you want to go around your house and make sure all the windows are locked. But the plots are, I mean, you can count on it. Every single book she wrote, the plot is just so, it's perfect, you know? And the other thing that I sort of absorbed through my Mary Higgins Clark phase was that her heroines actually do have a lot in common with the heroines of cozy mysteries. So a Mary Higgins Clark heroine is in a much more sinister world, but like a cozy heroine, she is independent, professional usually, and she's able to keep her wits about her even when she's afraid. And that is something that I also see in a lot of the heroines in cozies. So when I knew that I wanted to give Callie a book to be reading that she could sort of draw inspiration from and feel fortified by. And so Mary Higgins Clark seems like a natural author to pull in just because of that common thread. So
I think you're right in a way. Mary Higgins Clark's books are not considered traditional cozies.
Right.
But in many ways, they appeal to cozy readers because she never really dealt in graphic violence or graphic language, or all of that was off state. It was her books were really scary. I can remember, like, oh my God, you know.
Yeah.
But she didn't get that Stephen King kind of visceral descriptive elements to them.
Yeah.
So yeah, and she's definitely, I think I went through a similar phase too in like the late 80s up into about 2000. You never
Yeah.
forget reading her books because she does have that ability to drag you into that world, and her
Yeah.
protagonists, they're in a sense seeking justice too, even though it's more suspense oriented. Like the amateur sleuth, they want to see order returned to their world. So I thought you really did justice to her. It was really well done.
Thank you. Love hearing that.
Another element in the book that will definitely appeal to cozy readers is you do include your share of animals, Tin Man the cat, and a rabbit named Hazelnut. I found it interesting. Is it really true that as a child you tried to teach your cats telepathy?
I did. Like I said, I was weird. And cats, I mean, don't cats just seem psychic?
Yeah.
There's something going on there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So Tin Man I play around with him possibly being psychic, but the book it's not fantasy. It's very much grounded in reality. But yeah, I love Tin Man. He's the bookshop cat. He's Instagram famous, and he'll steal your heart if you let him.
He definitely will. It's kind of your nod to Lillian Jackson Braun and her cat books. Yeah.
Yes, and that was another important reading phase that I went through. Started in middle school and lasted a few years, but she had a ton of books. I mean, they just went on and on. The Cat Who Knew Shakespeare, The Cat Who Saw Red, The Cat Who Played Brahms. Mm-hmm. And they're just so charming. And I've gone back and reread a few recently, and they hold up. Like they're still good today. You know what I mean? Same with Mary Higgins Clark.
Did you know that they're actually going to be doing a sequel to Where Are the Children next year?
No, I didn't know that.
At least that's what they plan. Publishing changes on a dime, so things turn. But yeah, apparently it's like an anniversary connection to her first book. So
wow.
That should be exciting.
I know,
Um,
I'll look out for that.
your books are being marketed in many cases by your publisher as cozies, cozy mysteries. How would you define a cozy mystery yourself? How would you define your book rather?
I think it's important that in a cozy, the sleuth is an amateur. So if you're reading a mystery and it's all about a detective or a chief of police or a, I don't know, private investigator or something, it's probably not cozy. It's probably more like, traditional police procedural. In a cozy, the person figuring out the crime is just an everyday person, and they often have kind of fun jobs, like working in a bookshop, for example. Um, I think another hallmark of cozies, and we've talked about this, is they're on the lighter side of crime fiction. But there's a spectrum. Like some cozies are more rated G, they're really sweet. And then other cozies, such as Smile Beach Murder, are probably closer to PG-13. You can get away with a 4-letter word here and there, but never R. And then something else that I would say is the setting is usually contained. So in a cozy, you're not really jet setting or globetrotting. You're returning again and again to the same town, or sometimes a city, or wherever it happens to be. And I think that's what aids in making a cozy feel cozy, because the setting becomes so familiar. It becomes like a character in and of itself. So those are the things that come to mind. Would you add anything to that? I don't know. What's your take on it?
I think you're right. There's a spectrum in cozies.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times, many cozies, there's a hook to it, whether it's the bookstore or the bakery or the flower shop or
Yeah.
lighthouses or things like that. So that kind of will bring in another group of readers who are fascinated by embroidery or whatever it is that
Right. Yeah.
they're doing. So I think you've got all the angles covered. And I think you're right that sometimes we define things too narrowly. We think it has to have all these things, or if it doesn't, it can't be. But there's a lot of room for variations.
Yeah. And that's a good thing, because then you can play.
Let's talk a little bit about your writing process for Smile Beach Murder. You had said before that plotting was a big challenge because that was not something that came naturally to you. And you're right, a mystery does, you kind of have to know where the clues are going to go and who ends up getting arrested at the end. So
Yeah.
can you talk about your writing process? I'm also, if you are willing, I know that in addition to being a writer, you have a background in music. You are a composer and a musician. Rhythm is really important, also a published poet. So do you find that rhythm in writing is something that you really work on?
Love that question. Yeah. I'm not sure that I really think about rhythm consciously, but certainly on an unconscious level and on a word level, it's there. So writers talk about being either plotters or pantsers. Either you outline it completely before you even write a word, or you fly by the seat of your pants, just blank page, blinking cursor and go. For years, I was a pantser and had no plan. And now I am definitely a plotter. And I wonder if that was my problem too. For all those years when I couldn't get published, I just had wasn't in the right process. Because now I couldn't conceive of writing a book without having an outline first. And it's not rigid, but it's scaffolding for sure. But it still allows for deviations or flights of fancy. But you know where you're going when you have an outline. So I love my outlines. um, and yeah, I think with music it's interesting because I'm not an analytical person. I'm definitely right-brained, but when I'm writing, I'm thinking. I'm very much in my head and I'm analyzing. But when I'm working on music, it comes from a right scatterbrained place. There's no plan. I'm a pantser when I write music. And I wonder if that's because there's no words, and I don't know, just it comes from a more intuitive place inside of me. There isn't quite as much intuition when it comes to producing books. So yeah, it's interesting. It's complex.
Yeah. What's the best piece of advice you've been given about writing in your long career?
Best piece of advice. Well, you hear this a lot said to writers, and it's not untrue, but you hear like, don't give up, be persistent. And yes, be persistent, don't give up. When you walk into a bookstore, every book you see is the result of a writer not giving up at some point. And it doesn't seem like enough. I think there needs to be a little amendment. So my amendment is, don't give up and be teachable, be coachable. Because if you're doing the same thing for years and years, just pig-headed and wondering why it's not working or why you're not getting published, that's not really going to get you far, and it's going to make you very frustrated, and it's going to wreck your confidence and maybe not result in good writing anyway. But if you're willing to grow and develop your skills and turn weaknesses into strengths, and think about feedback from trusted sources, then you might find that you're getting where you want to go a little faster. So don't give up and change. Allow yourself to change,
I think that's very smart, because I've heard something kind of similar said by other writers, into effect that if one person tells you something about your writing, you can dismiss it. If 2 people tell you the same thing, okay, maybe it's not true. But if 10 people tell you same thing about your, maybe it's them and not you that is right.
Yeah. Yes.
Let's go ahead, and I don't know if you can, but I'm excited to think that Smile Beach Murder is the first in a series. Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay.
So book 2 is under contract. It comes out next spring. It's called Murder on Mustang Beach. So there'll be the paperback publication of Smile Beach Murder, and then shortly followed by the hardback of Murder on Mustang Beach. And I'm working on book 3. It's not contracted yet, but hopefully there will be many more, but we'll see.
That's wonderful news. Maybe as many as the Lillian Jackson Braun Cat books. I think she ran to like 40 or something.
That would be incredible.
One of the other things I love hearing from authors, especially authors who are big readers, is what's on their reading list, what they've read that they want to share with others. Can you share anything that you're looking forward to or have?
Yes. So right now I'm reading, I have it here. I love props. This is called Remarkable Women of the Outer Banks by Hannah Bunn West. If you're interested in Outer Banks history, even a little, I would definitely not miss this. It's really well researched and well written. And she just became a Southern Indie bestseller. So congrats, Hannah Bunn West. Remarkable Women of the Outer Banks, I would recommend. I also recently read, I'll put this on your radar, a cozy that comes out in September. It's called A Death in Door County, and the author is Annalise Ryan. Yeah.
I've been thinking about that.
Have you read an advance
copy?
copy?
I'm anxiously waiting for it. So
it's really good. So it's about a cryptozoologist who is investigating the possibility of a Loch Ness monster type creature lurking in the waters of Lake Michigan, and it's really spine tingly. I liked it a lot, so look out for that one.
That's a new series for the author, because she's written some other things, I believe.
Yes, the first in a new series. So A Death in Door County, highly recommend.
You can already order it at the Poison Pen, so if you're interested, we have it in our system.
Perfect.
Glad you mentioned that. Yeah, I just seen something about it in a publisher's catalog. Before we go, because it looks like despite our best efforts, we're running out of time. What can you tell us about your preference for social media? Do you share with readers via certain platforms?
I'm on Instagram and Facebook, but Instagram is more my jam. Facebook is, I'm not on there as frequently. So it's aliciabessettebooks.com on Instagram. And I have a newsletter. It's once a month. It's not annoying. And you can sign up for that on my website, which is aliciabessette.com. So I'd love to have people on my newsletter and follow me on Instagram.
And it's a wonderful way to know when your next book is coming. So you don't have to worry about that. I can't believe, yeah, our time just flew by. It's been wonderful having you, Alicia. I can't recommend your new book, Smile Beach Murder, enough. It's a terrific summer read, winter read, whenever you want to read it. It's got all the elements I love. And especially if you're a reader who loves other writers talking about influences, books and things in their life, it really is like almost a pan. I don't know if I got that word right or not, but we'll go with it. 2 books, mystery writers. And I want to thank Alicia for taking time to visit us virtually. And I want to
thank you. This was so much fun. And I really appreciate it. It was my pleasure.
Oh, thank you. And thank everyone for tuning into another virtual author event at the Poison Pen Bookstore.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.